Welcome back, Margaret. This is a lot of times my favorite part. Influencers come sometimes in a second. Sometimes it's a lifetime. When I speak, a lot of times I share about my grandfather being my first influencer. He was from Kyiv and he had an accent, and he would take me for walks when I was a little kid, 5 or 6, in the park. And one time I asked him, I called him Zeta. I said, Zeta, how do you know all these people? He talked to everybody. Probably where I got it. And he said, well, I didn't. One day I smiled at one and they smiled back at me. And then they started talking to me. So I talked to them. This is with the Kyiv accent too. He's telling me this. And then another one smiled and so on and so forth. And he was telling me this one's name, that one's name. And I got it as good as a 5-year-old could get it, but then I got it more and more. And so you get your influencers in all different places. Can you share with us? I know there's probably plenty, maybe 2 or 3 that have influenced you in your life.
Gosh, many people have influenced me in my life. And I think it's partly because I'm curious and I'm open to influence.
Wow, that's important. Good.
I think that's a starting point. And I love the story of your grandfather, particularly someone with an accent. I can identify with that.
I'm sure.
I love it. And I hope to never lose the accent because it is.
I'm with you there. If someone tells me they don't hear mine, I go home and practice just to make sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to your question of influence, gosh, it's hard to pick a few, but I'll pick one from earlier in my career and then one later. And the common thread will be education. 2 teachers. So the first was my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Sheehan. And Mrs. Sheehan was a wonderful educator, a very sophisticated woman. She had, at the time, remarkable poise and elegance. She was probably the most educated woman I knew at 5 years old. And I grew up very, very modestly, as I mentioned in the past, on a farm in Ireland. I'm first generation high school graduate. And Mrs. Sheehan influenced me around the power of education. She took an interest in me and privately, outside the context of the classroom, coached me in recitations and performance and gave me that gift of appreciating my voice literally and metaphorically, and also the confidence to speak out. And that gift has been extraordinary. She's influenced me in my comfort level in taking a stage, and also my recognition that we all have a voice, and given me a lot of confidence in using mine.
And that's in kindergarten.
And that was kindergarten, and that gift has stayed with me ever since. The second influencer I'll pick, just to keep the theme constant, is also an educator, but that is the dean of Harvard Business School. Nitin Nourier was the dean up until recently. And he was a professor in my first year in that program. And he taught a class called Lead. And Lead, for some of the colleagues, was a soft class. There were no financial numbers. There were no models. But in my mind, it was the most powerful class I took in business school, because the class explored incentives. People's incentives and understanding why someone would do something. That long before it was fashionable, we talked about empathy and understanding the other individual's point of view. And that learning is something I tried to practice, but certainly is something that I appreciate on a very deep level. And arguably, it'll transcend all the technical training around models and other skills, because it is so foundational to being successful in a company and indeed in life.
That's fantastic. I love you go from kindergarten to the Harvard dean. It's quite amazing, actually, how you can be impacted so much at both levels like that. So is there another one really quick you want to share about?
Actually, I'll stay with the same theme. A profound professor, the late Clayton Christensen. Clay Christensen recently, before he passed, wrote a book called The Job to be Done. And I took Clay's classes at business school. And the theme of the book is around focusing. It's a very powerful business lesson when you're creating a product, when you're embracing an initiative, or indeed doing branding work, asking yourself, what's the job to be done? And to me, that cuts across so much. It helps me simplify, and you know how important simplicity is to me and to us at Siegel and Gale. Just asking that simple question, what's the job to be done?
Yeah, it's so brilliant how it tied back to what we talked about in the main part about what do we have to do? What is the job to be done? Nice circle around. Well done. Thank you so
Thanks.
much for sharing that. I think we don't realize, or we should realize, we're probably influencing people all the time ourselves too. And we have a choice to be positive or negative. And because we know who's influenced us. So great examples. Great example.
Yeah, and Mark, I would underline your point because it is a good question to ask us who our influencers are, because then it forces us to reflect. And I think when you reach a certain stage in your career, the way I think about it, Mark, is our voices carry.
Yep.
And you have to be thoughtful, back to the training around voice in the literal sense, but much more expansively, you have to be thoughtful around what you're saying because people are looking. And that's a tremendous responsibility. And thank you for reminding us of that.
No, thanks for saying that. It is really important, and even just a smile to someone out there, right? That really makes a big difference, especially in times like this. So, so I appreciate you. Way to go! Thanks for all this.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure.